All right, today we're diving into a piece of law from 1950 that, believe it or not, controls a massive, multi-million-dollar industry in Rajasthan, India. It's called the Rajasthan Excise Act, and this one law covers everything from a local brewery all the way up to the state's tax revenue. So let's get right into it.
It's a fantastic question, right? You might be thinking, how can a law that's over 70 years old possibly matter to the beer you might grab today or to a whole state's budget? Well, it turns out this act is very much alive and kicking, shaping a huge industry and defining the government's power over it.
So here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll get a handle on the law itself. Then we'll see who's actually in charge of making sure people follow it. After that, we'll look at what happens when you break the rules, the consequences. And finally, we'll see how this whole thing plays out in the real world.
Okay, so let's start at square one. To really get what this law is all about, we have to know exactly what it controls and some of the key terms it uses.
The scope of this act is just huge. It's not just about a finished bottle of liquor. It covers the entire life cycle, everything, from the moment it's manufactured to the final sale. It is the complete rulebook for a whole range of intoxicating stuff in the state.
And this whole thing really revolves around one key term from Section 3 of the Act, excisable article. Now, this is the official legal name for everything the law controls. And it's not just the final product, like beer or whiskey. It's also the raw materials and even the machinery used to make it. If it's part of the process, this law has it covered. Of course, a law is just words on paper if there's no one around to enforce it. So that leads to a pretty logical question. Who actually holds the power here? Who's in charge? Well, the Act created a special government body just for this job, the State Excise Department. You can think of them as the regulators, the tax collectors, and the enforcement all rolled into one. Their entire purpose is to make sure every single rule in this Act is followed.
And the structure is a very clear top-down system. It starts way up at the government level with the Secretary of Finance. Right under them is the Excise Commissioner, the big boss of the whole department. From there, the state gets divided into zones run by additional commissioners, which are then broken down into districts managed by district excise officers. And finally, you've got the excise inspectors on the ground handling the day-to-day work. It's a really organized chain of command, all designed for total control.
So now we know who's in charge. But what are they actually looking for? This brings us to the good stuff, the illegal activities, the specific actions that will land you in some serious trouble under this law. If you really want to get to the heart of what's forbidden, you go straight to Section 54. This is the part of the law that spells out in no uncertain terms what you absolutely cannot do without official permission. It's the core list of don'ts.
And here are the big ones. You can't just move these products across state lines, you can't make or sell them, and you can't even just have them without a license. Thinking of running an unlicensed brewery? Nope, that's an offense. How about just having the equipment to make liquor without a permit? Yeah, that's an offense too. Even just bottling it for sale requires permission. This act pretty much covers every angle to keep things under tight control. So what happens when someone gets caught doing one of those things? Well, the act lays out some really serious consequences, and they are designed to be a powerful deterrent.
The core idea here is really simple. The bigger the crime, the bigger the punishment. This isn't just about punishment for its own sake. It's about making large-scale illegal operations way too risky to even think about. A huge factor that decides the penalty is the sheer amount of illegal booze involved.
And you can see that escalation so clearly right here. For an offense with less than 50 bulk liters, you're looking at up to 3 years in prison and a fine of either 20,000 rupees or 5 times the tax money the government lost. But the moment you cross that 50-liter mark, the minimum prison time jumps to 3 years, and the fine could double to 10 times the lost tax. The law is clearly built to crack down hard on the big fish.
And it's really important to get this. The law isn't just for criminals operating in the shadows. It also keeps the licensed, totally legitimate businesses in check. If you have a permit to sell liquor but you break the rules of that permit, well, there are specific penalties just for you.
For example, Section 58 of the Act points out a 5,000 rupee fine for any licensee who intentionally breaks the rules of their license. It's a different kind of penalty, but it's all aimed at making sure even the legal players stay in line.
The punishments don't even stop at fines and jail. The Act gives authorities another incredibly powerful tool, confiscation. This means they can literally seize property that was used to commit the crime.
Section 69 lists out everything they can take. Obviously, the illegal liquor itself is gone, but they don't stop there. They can also seize all the manufacturing equipment, the packaging, and even the car, cart, or, yes, the animal that was used to transport it. The financial hit from this alone could be absolutely devastating.
Okay, we've seen the rules, the people in charge, and the penalties. But how does all this work in the real world? Let's move to our last section, where we look at the law on the books versus the reality on the ground.
To get this kind of insight, we're going to turn to a state audit report. Think of this as a government document that checks whether departments are actually following the rules and doing their jobs right. It's a perfect window into the practical side of all this.
This quote from the report is pretty striking. What the auditors found was a situation where a brewery had a massive amount of expired beer. Now, according to the rules, that stock should have been destroyed, and the tax on it should have been collected. But the report says neither of those things happened.
And we're not talking about a small mistake here. The audit says that over 31,000 cases of beer were just left sitting there, totally unfit to be sold, and the government never got the tax money it was owed. This is a real, tangible example of a breakdown in the very process the Act created.
So, when you put it all together, what do we have? The Rajasthan Excise Act of 1950 is, without a doubt, a comprehensive and powerful law. It sets up a clear chain of command, it lays out very specific rules, and it backs them all up with some really severe penalties.
And this brings us to one last critical question. The Act is designed to protect public safety and bring in money for the state. But as that audit report shows, there can be a huge gap between the rules on paper and what actually happens. It really makes you wonder, is any law, no matter how perfectly written, ultimately only as strong as the people enforcing it? That's something to chew on. Thanks for tuning in.